Welcome to Leaders on the Edge, where bi-weekly I sit with extraordinary individuals from around the world who are top thinkers and doers. They're committed to developing and mastering their craft along with their mind and their emotional resilience so that they can act boldly in situations where others often hang back and play it safe. And together, we're revolutionizing the role of leaders. So I'm very excited today to introduce my guest and friend, Angelique Rewers. She is the CEO and founder of Bold Haus. Inc. magazine has actually said that she is the undisputed champion at helping small businesses land big clients. She's, for decades, been harnessing an experience of navigating all sides of the corporate buying table. She has developed a proprietary framework that is leveraged by thousands of small businesses across 72 countries worldwide so that they can secure multiple 5, 6, and even 7-figure corporate contracts. Angelique's groundbreaking global conferences bring in small business and business owners from a diverse background together with major brands. Now, we're talking brands like AT&T, IBM, Coca-Cola, UPS, PayPal, Marriott, Accenture. I mean, you name it, including Major League Baseball. Her clients are landing deals with iconic Fortune 500 brands, as well as organizations in the mid-market, startup, high education, nonprofit, and government sectors. In addition, Angelique has been named an Enterprising Woman of the Year by Enterprising Woman magazine. And she's been featured in publications such as Entrepreneur, ABC, Business Insider, NBC, Huffington Post, Forbes, and it goes on and on. She's a sought-after speaker and has shared stages with superstars like people like Hollywood, Steve Harvey, Shark Tank's Daymond John, best-selling author Seth Godin, and NFL Super Bowl champion Jamal Lewis. Oh, everybody just take a breath.
That last one might be my favorite. You know how I feel about sports, Deborah.
Right,
and
exactly.
I'm a Ravens fan. My dog is named Raven. So being on the stage with Jamal Lewis was just, the be all end all for me.
Oh, that's fabulous. I love it, and I'm very, very jealous. So, but I'll get over it. I'll get over it. So Angelique, give us a bit. I mean, obviously we know your background in that now, but I'm more curious about you as a human being, as to, where did you come from and why are you here on the planet Earth? One of those small questions we like to start out with.
Yeah, just a small question there, Deborah. Well, first, I just want to say, I really mean this. It is an honor to be on your show and to get to have this conversation with you, because I know how much you've done and how much leadership you have shown, and how you've taken folks in really some of the most, I think, intense fields, including professional sports and major organizations, and really have helped them to go to the next level of leadership and really take a no BS approach. And I think what people find from me today is I'm very unapologetic, as are you.
Yes.
And so it really is just an honor to be here. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate it very much.
Well, you are doing really important things, and these conversations are really important. I think, so who am I? Why am I here? Look, I think that if you could rewind the clock and, meet me at 5 years old, you wouldn't be one bit surprised at the Spitfire that I was then, and who I've been. I think there's always a question of nature versus nurture, at least. I think the balance of that. And I think it was a little bit of both for me, in that I did come into this world very highly conscious as a child, really looking around the world with a degree of consciousness that I don't think most young people have,
Mm.
and really watching adults and watching life and watching how people went about things. And I remember as a kid just watching the repetition of the lives of people around me, family, neighbors, teachers, etc. And I just remember thinking, there must be more. There must be more meaning to life. I don't aspire to grow up and have a job and do that same job for 25,
That
35 years.
JOB thing, right?
Yeah, and I just and also just that thing, that idea of like every day doing the same thing. And so from a very young age, I questioned a lot of things. I was probably one of the only kids who would repeatedly get suspended from Sunday school for questioning the teachers, because I really wanted the answers. And they often weren't equipped to give me the answers I was seeking.
All right.
And I think that is in how it's manifested today for me, that sort of questioning that, what are we all doing here, is really looking at, what we do at Bold House is we help the small business owners, we sometimes call the Davids, take on the Goliaths, right? The
Right.
Davids versus and the Goliaths, except it's not really a battle between David versus Goliath. It's really David helping the Goliaths. And I'm so passionate about that. And I do think it's part of why I'm here, because at the end of the day, my strengths are strategy. They're in the idea of being able to relate different things and bridge the gap between what a lot of times small business owners don't know how to communicate what it is that they do in a way that resonates with the people that they're trying to transform. And I think that really has been a constant thread throughout my whole life of building the bridges between communications between different sides, and also to help people take what might seemingly be impossible and really make it be possible. And so I think that's a little bit about who I am on a tangible level. I'm an only child. I had a single mom. I come from a very matriarchal family, and I think that shapes a lot of who I am today. I'm a mom. My twins are 12. I'm an avid Ravens fan, which I think everybody got. My dog is named Raven. I'm married to my high school sweetheart. We started dating when I was just 16 years old. So I'm a very loyal, dedicated person. And so, we've been married all these years, and, just absolutely love living in South Florida in the Palm Beach area. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you for sharing that. I always think it's great to get to know the person a bit and their background on that. And I think that's part of what the issues are, which I'm curious. I want to
Mm,
explore with you a little bit with the leadership in so many of the corporations,
mm,
no matter if they're small business or major global, businesses. So I'm curious because your company works with some of these large corporations as well as guiding others and teaching others how they can, as entrepreneurs, work within these organizations. What are you seeing? Even if we look at coming up with 2022, having
mm.
come, I don't know if we're not through the pandemic, but we're certainly broaching the other side of it a little bit. What do you see as some of the challenges coming up in 2022 when it comes to business leadership and how they are attempting to be successful and grow a successful team within their company?
Yeah, I think I'll start on more of the corporate mid-market side of things, the
Mhm.
larger and mid-sized organizations first. The first thing is that there's just a numbers problem. So anywhere from 10 to 14% of leadership roles are sitting vacant right now. And most organizations don't have a leadership pipeline created for that. And they continue to make the same mistakes. I mean, if you look back over the last 10, 20, 30, even 40 years at leadership development
Mhm.
and all of the money that's been spent and all of the time that's been spent, and of course, time is money. So we're back to the money question again. When you look
Always.
at, right? I mean, so when you look at how much time and effort and money and resources go into leadership, and yet how ineffective organizations are at building leadership. I think that, I hope, starts to have people asking bigger questions, like what's really going on here. So one, heading into 2022, you just have massive leadership gaps. I mean, vacancies, empty
Right.
seats sitting there, right? There's some talk out of organizations like Gartner that maybe there won't be traditional bosses. People would work without a boss. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of in my life.
It's like taking a
I love
child and throwing
Gartner.
them on the street and, saying good luck with that.
Yeah, I mean, what are you even talking about? And I, and so, we're decades away from AI filling that role.
Right.
And by the way, companies like Cisco 20 years ago thought that they'd go to a flat organization where there weren't really managers and bosses, and that really didn't work out so well. There are organizations who've been there and tried it, and it didn't work. So let's not let's not be crazy here. But yeah, you got a big vacancy problem. I think you've also got, on a more woo-woo level, you have a conscious awakening problem that isn't being discussed inside of companies because they don't really understand what's happening. The Great Resignation is just one piece of that. But we've been seeing for a long time, women especially, voluntarily off ramping from organizations because it no longer is a fit for them. They can't always put their finger on why that is.
Right.
But it's because there's a consciousness disalignment between the conscious awakening of humans, and organizations haven't had that conscious awakening. So that's a problem. Nobody really wants to talk about it because it is a little woo woo, but it is all the evidence. It's like gravity. You can't see it, but you know it's there.
You
That's a
see the
big
evidence
thing.
of it too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a big thing for next year. And so those are, I feel like, the two sort of conflicts that are really butting up against each other, where you've got this massive leadership gap both in the pipeline and actual vacant seats right now, and then at the same time you have this sort of conscious awakening, and a lot of the best leaders who would lead with their with their whole mind, body, soul, which is what employees are really craving, they're leaving, they're off ramping. And then I would say the last piece of it that's really challenging is just the speed of change, and the disruption. Really, we've only dipped our toe in just how much change is coming. So I think that's really going to be very, very traumatic for a lot of people. And as we get into the conversation, I'll share more about what I mean on that front. But I think the planet is really going to face some serious trauma over the next decade or so with some of the changes that are happening. And we really don't equip people from a young age to be leaders. I think that's one of our biggest problems, is that we expect people after they graduate from college or they graduate from graduate school, they go get their MBAs or what have you. They come into the workforce. Companies don't really do any leadership until people are finally identified as potential rising stars. It's far too late in a human being to build leadership skills. So, yeah, I think we've got some leadership problems.
Big time. I know when I wrote my first book, How to Lead, Level, Leverage Any Pack, I was writing about the spirit of entrepreneurial leadership and how you should be able to lead from any seat. Now, I wasn't
Yes.
the first one to think of that.
Yes.
And yet the book at that time was way before its time, because the idea of leading, as you're talking about being a conscious leader,
Mhm.
was it was too soft, or at
Mm.
least thought to be. And I know the soft skills right now around the world, with all the
Mhm.
different consultants and businesses and that I talk to, are now being considered the power skills.
Oh, yeah.
Um, I'm curious too. What I heard is, and I've used this term before, and I'm sure others have also, but the Great Resignation. I think it's really a great realization that
Mm.
people are understanding. And I know you've talked
That's
about it. I've talked
beautiful.
about it. The Maslow's hierarchy. That we're all taken around the world down to that lower rung of safety and security, and just had our foundation shook to the core, to where most people are now looking and saying, what's really important?
Mm. So true.
Um,
I think, for what it's worth, I think there's another side to this coin as well. It's not a popular one to talk about, but it's one that I find myself talking about more and more often. And companies, sadly, because they eroded trust in their organizations, and Edelman, by the way, God bless them, have tracked this trust factor for 15 years now, and just watch trust be eroded. No one knew that what it kind of impact that would have during the pandemic. But you see the lack of trust in all of our institutions, and how that has led to conspiracy theories and just absolute, frankly, comical and absurd, tangents out there. But the other side of it is that lack of trust has driven the Great Resignation. But also, I think companies are going to be in for a rude awakening, because they also can't let a pendulum swing too far in one direction. We haven't done a good job of really articulating to employees what's expected of them in a reasonable way, and really we've also lost accountability in organizations, and it's caused frustration amongst leaders. And then when the leaders get frustrated because employees don't take ownership of their role, they don't put forth quality work, the leaders often are ill-equipped on how to turn that around. That leads to really negative leadership traits, where you see more of that command and control. But they also have, I think, some very legitimate frustrations with employees. Not all, but companies have real problems with employees. And I think that's one of the leadership questions we've got to explore next year is, how do we help people feel really fulfilled at work and have balance, but also in exchange for that, be expected to understand what it means to take ownership over your role and really put forward quality work that the organization is paying you for. And I think that is a discussion that we're lacking, that other pillar of the discussion. And I would say to leaders, you better start thinking about how you're going to have that conversation, because it can't only be about fulfillment. There is a reason that we're compensated for our roles. So I think I think this is a really multi-layered conversation, Deborah, that people are going to have next year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'm curious what your thoughts are um, around partnering. And I'm talking not just partnering as some type of a supplier or entrepreneur or consultant coming in and partnering with the company. I'm talking about leadership partnering with the employees. Again, there's always, the UDM, the ultimate decision maker,
Yes.
that hopefully doesn't have to flip a coin to make a decision. But if they could also instead ask and have conversations with the people they've hired as experts and are often the front line. And it needs, in my view anyway, it needs to start with the CEO and the C-suite. Like you said, trusting each other, talking across silos, working like a good football team would work.
Yes. Yes.
Everybody play your position.
Amen.
So yeah. So give me
Yeah.
some thoughts around that, what you're seeing or
I
believing.
think, well, here, I agree that actually needs to happen more, but with an asterisk to it. So it's a really great idea for organizations to do that, because you are hiring people for the unique perspectives and talents and skills and expertise they're bringing. And no one wants to be silenced, right? We all want our value to be recognized. I mean, I think employees have stated that loud and clear, and then they voted with their feet as they walk out the door when they're not valued and seen and heard. And let's also talk about seeing all employees, because so many employees are not seen. We have real diversity issues inside of organizations, lots of unconscious biases that aren't dealt with. But my recommendation to companies that want to partner more with their employees, aside from, yes, you need to do that, is you're going to have to actually invest in educating your employees on the challenges of the organization, how the organization makes money. I can't tell you, something like 60% of employees in a company don't even really understand the various profit lines that their own company has in making money. They don't understand some of the legal considerations that companies have to look at, some of the regulations, some of the complicated challenges with operating in different parts of the world, some of the constraints that they have with what they're allowed to say, even from a marketing perspective, or if they're a publicly traded company. And so employees can only be as good of partners as they can to understand some of the deeper complexities. It was an argument that I often had as someone who was leading internal communications in a Fortune 150 company,
Mhm.
because I wanted to tell the employees more. I wanted to give them a greater understanding, because when you're operating with only a small fraction of an understanding of the organization that you work in, it's easy to lob complaints or to get frustrated that a company isn't doing certain things. Well, why is it like this? They have no idea some of the challenges that it's under, or some of the challenges of dealing with, frankly, customers, consumers. You can read some of the horror stories on subreddits today of these outlandish, there's like tales of the waiters, tales of people who work in retail, and the challenges that organizations are up against, from regulations and laws and lawsuits, and just managing tens of thousands of employees or hundreds of thousands of customers. And so if companies want to partner with their employees, and I would encourage them to do that, because that's how you're going to get the true value, and build loyalty and have folks really invested in staying in your organization. But also, to be a good partner, those employees need more transparent information. They need you to explain things to them. You need to fold them in so that they can really take ownership, from an understanding perspective in what the company does and some of the constraints it's under. It changes. And honestly, we watched it happen, where the more we shared with employees what some of our challenges were, the more those employees actually, got on the same page with us and wanted to help. But when
Right.
you
Yes.
block them out, it doesn't work. And I can't, emphasize enough the importance of transparent communication and education for your employees.
Yeah. I love what you're saying and how you're sharing it, because you look at so many uh, leaders in companies that talk about, well, it's an open door policy. Just come in, we'll have a conversation. You have a problem. Nobody wants to do that because they're
No,
afraid they're going to be looked at in a negative light if they're the ones that are bringing the challenges. So I
absolutely.
look at, well, bring the challenge, but also bring some ideas for a solution. But at the same time, when you look, and I totally agree, when we talk about partnering, there used to be, and I had it whenever I was running a construction company. I had a feeling that if I shared too much, it was just going to scare the hell out of people
Mm.
about the company and everything that it has to go through, and all the decisions that are made every single day on multiple projects at multiple levels, at multiple dollar figures, and that. And you're right. When it started to become, when I had a realization that, as you mentioned, that to open up and to say, and here's why, and here's
Yeah.
what goes on, and here's your how important you are to this project, no matter what small little bit or major um, piece you bring into the formula. You're important. That one cog that you bring could disrupt everything.
Oh yeah, and that's
So,
that's exactly right. One cog can throw the entire. I'll give
mm,
you also just an example from my own business, because I don't think this goes only for leaders in
mhm,
mid-sized companies or big corporations. I think this goes for all of us as leaders. So I'll give you an
mm,
example. One of our um so our focus, as you know, Deborah, at Bold House, is
mm.
helping experts to sell their expertise to organizations, universities, nonprofits, mid-market, corporate, etc. One of our missions as a company, when we look at sort of our core beliefs, our brand promises, our mission, is to actually help cultivate self-sufficient, fully empowered small business CEOs. Because it's really
Yes.
difficult to grow your business and work with organizations if you're not a self-sufficient, empowered, thriving CEO.
Mm.
So oftentimes we might bring, like, let's say, a new faculty member on our team or someone on the team, and they'll look at something and they'll say, people miss their calls. They didn't show up for their calls, or they didn't do this. We should hire someone who just does this isn't the exact suggest, but like, we'll just do
Right.
outbound calling to remind people to be, 5 minutes before their call, to get on the call. And it's like, no, 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 no. I hear why your suggestion is, oh, our mission is to create self-sufficient, fully empowered CEOs who take 100% responsibility for their success in this world. So we're not here to be their assistants, to be their moms or their babysitters, right? Like
Right.
that's not what our job is. If we do that, we are completely undermining an environment that expects CEOs to really understand what it means to take 100% responsibility, because their customers, their clients, if you land a contract with Facebook, they're going to expect you to meet every deadline with them, to show up for every meeting that they schedule with you. They're not going to say, "Oh, we'll call you and remind you to come to a call with us," right? So it's just an example of a tangible where when you educate your team on what the mission is, their suggestions will line up. Their partnering will be in alignment with those missions, will be in alignment with the goals, versus an idea that on the surface sounds like, why would you not do that, to wait a second, that actually is the opposite of how we should be thinking about
Exactly.
it, right? And so that's why as leaders we have to do a better job of always educating our team and reminding them and really living our core values, our brand promises, our mission every day, and using that to guide our conversation with our teams, guide our conversation with our customers, and even use those principles to make the decisions about where we invest and how we structure our companies.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And to me, what I hear is you're looking at behaviors. How are
Yes.
people behaving, and are they behaving in a way that, if they behave in a way that they don't show up for a phone call on time, that's for them and to help them in some way. As you said, how are they going to behave whenever they show up with a business that they're looking to work with? And I always believe behaviors much more than I believe anybody's words, because
Yes.
the behaviors will show you who they truly are. So I'm curious, one of the things that I look at and work with corporations on, instead of KPIs, key performance indicators, which I think are extremely important,
Mm.
uh, in order to get those key performance indicators, I look at, you need to have KBIs. What are your key behavioral indicators? So
Mm.
how do you need to behave in order to get that end result? So I'm
I
curious
love
what your
that.
thoughts are around that, and how you see how you as a leader of your clients as well as leader of your own team, uh, what behaviors do you expect of them and of yourself that would get more success, better success, more consistent success within business?
Oh, I love that. I love KBIs. That's one of the reasons actually, and I'll quote you on that, but
Mhm.
we often say, buyers are liars, and we don't mean it in a derogatory way. It's just that a lot of times if you ask your customers or your target clients or your prospects, "Hey, would you want help with this? Is this something that you'd be interested in?" And then you develop that service or that solution, and then they don't buy it, and you're like, "But you all said you wanted this, right?"
Right.
um right, and then because people think that they'll behave in a certain way, or they think they want something, but their actual behaviors are what you need to. It's actually everything that we teach about how to win
Right.
corporate clients is based on how decision makers, not what they say, but what they actually do, right?
Right.
As a leader, some of the behaviors, so the first thing is, we hire for integrity. That's one
Mm.
thing, right? And I think I can say this on your show, but we have a no asshole policy
I
on
love
our
that.
team, right?
Yes.
So we hire for integrity. We hire for the type of individual that we're going to be working with, first and foremost. I think, some behaviors, sometimes it's behaviors we're not looking for. So, our team doesn't spend time complaining or going behind another team member's back. We have very open conversations. If I repeat something, if I say something to one team member, and I say, well, this person's going to need to focus more on this. I just had a conversation telling that individual they need to focus more on this. And now I'm letting the other team member know I've had that conversation. So we're going to all focus on that, so very
Right.
open communication. I think another thing is I talked about taking ownership. And I do think that organizations and leaders need to explain what it means to take ownership and what that actually looks like. One of the things that we look for when you take ownership is that, passing off something to someone else does not mean it's no longer your responsibility.
Right. You don't
So
get to just
right.
wipe your hands and it's gone. Yeah.
Exactly. So for us, it's about, did you get it to the end zone? Did you get the football to the end zone, or did you
Right.
sit it down in the red zone and then you walked off the field and you're expecting somebody else to pick up that football and carry it in, and you just, you're like, well, I'm the quarterback, I left it there, I got it to the end zone, but I'm just going to leave it to my tight ends to deal with it, and I
Right.
don't care what happens. So that's one. Another one, I think, that to that end is, and this is something that I realized I wasn't doing. This is something in the last year and a half that's been an area of growth for me. And as somebody who prides myself in clear, concise communication, I was sort of gobsmacked when I realized I wasn't doing something so freaking important. So I realized when I was tasking my team, I was tasking them with a step. I need you to, contact a, contact, say to my assistant, contact a florist and do X, or,
Right.
we need to get a hotel, or we need to do whatever. And I wasn't actually tasking them with my end goal. I was sort of tasking them with steps, but they
Yes.
weren't necessarily achieving my actual intention, my actual goal outcome that I was looking for. And so they would have gone through and actually technically accomplished the task. I mean, I had really no one to blame but myself, because the task had been completed, but the mission of the troops did not get accomplished. And so now what I'm doing, and this has been a big thing for me from a behavior perspective, it was starting with my own behavioral change of, am I actually asking for a mission? Am I assigning the troops a mission? And, yes, I can happily give them guidance on some steps they may want to take to accomplish that mission. But if I'm not talking about what our mission is, that we need to, invade that city and take that city, or whatever it is, like, that's the mission, not getting on the boats and heading to that location. So, so that for me has been a huge turning point of realizing that I wasn't actually equipping my team to be set up for success, because I failed
Right.
to, give the mission.
Right. That's what they check it off the list, but you just don't quite feel good about it because it doesn't feel complete sometimes. Or,
Yeah.
to go back to football, which I know you and I both love.
Yes.
I used to tell, players when I was working with NFL players and that, they say, well, I want to win. I said, well, good for you. Um, but that's not going to get you a win. Go back again to the behaviors. What are the nuances? What do you need as a wide receiver? Just because a ball's coming to you and you are in the right position doesn't mean you're going to catch it, because too often
Absolutely.
they look downfield before they actually have the ball in their hands and tuck it in. So I always look at, as you said, the mission, let them understand where they're headed and why, what's important as far as the outcome, but then go back to the nuances of what's it going to take to get you there.
Yeah, and I think, and it shows up, I think, for leaders all the time. I remember a couple of months ago, I said to someone on the team, because I was busy and I didn't think about my end mission, and I said, I need you to reach out to, these 10 folks. We have some interviews that we need to fill. Reach out to these 10 folks. So they did reach out to those 10 folks, but let's say 5 of them are available. And okay, but you reached out to the 10, but that really wasn't my mission. My mission was actually to fill the 10 interview spots, right? And so that was really the goal, was to get 10, show interviews lined up. And so if you're not communicating, and it almost always comes down to communication, right?
Right.
So I
Absolutely.
think for me, that key behavior is everyone on the team communicating the end vision, and also is everyone connecting the dots for everyone else, because a lot of times one team member will send another team member, in an organization, off to do something without giving them all the information that they need to understand the context of what that mission is. And so that's something that we're looking to change behavior on in this team even more next year is, are we all talking about really what our end outcomes are that we're seeking, and explaining to other folks how they fit into that? I think that's how you really change behavior.
Right. And I would agree with that. The one thing I'm curious about as well is um, perceptions of even certain words. When we talk about
Mm,
communication, there are certain words that maybe a company uses because it's their their natural language within the company, or because of where you were raised, or because, I've got a
yeah.
client in New Zealand that we laugh every once in a while. It's two women who own a corporation over there. And I might say something, they'll start laughing. And I'm like, all right, what? And they say, well, the word X, whatever the word was, to us means this. And I'm like,
Oh,
oh, all right. Or vice versa. They'll say something. I'm like, what in the heck are you talking about? Tell me some different words, come at it a little bit differently so I can understand.
oh, yeah.
And again, no one it's like somebody speaking Spanish to me, perfectly good language. I just don't understand it.
Right.
So when we can stop even on different words or phrases and say, okay, so what does that mean to you?
Yeah.
So I am sure that I can fulfill or debate, what you're looking to achieve.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And especially now, I mean, you look at how almost all business is global in nature. And we
Yeah.
really don't do a good job of spending enough time. And honestly, it starts, to be perfectly honest, it starts at a young age that we don't do a good job. I mean, you know, and this is no disrespect to teachers, especially after these last couple of years and just
Right.
the work that teachers, but it's very clear to me as a parent and someone who studied corporate communications, employee communications, how communications actually happens, that we're not even doing, there's clearly no training for people who go to college to become a teacher on how to actually do effective communications. And I bet you most parents would agree with me, when they get communications from schools and teachers and administrators, it's kind of a hot mess of communication. I mean, just totally disorganized information.
Right.
And so the problem is, from a young age, we're actually not teaching communication, effective communication. We don't teach parents how to be effective communicators. We don't teach the teachers how to be effective communicators. So we don't teach the kids how to be effective communicators. It wasn't until I was in uh, my full time jobs that I realized how much I had to focus on communication. One of the best books that was ever written about business communications, and it is an old book. I don't even think it's in print anymore, and that's a shame, because it
Mm.
honestly is the best thing. And I say that as someone, Deborah, who has spent my life, from being an international communications major to now
Right.
really with communication front and center. But there's a book, it was called Your Attention Please: How to Communicate with Today's, it was like, distracted, disinterested, disengaged audiences. I
Right.
might have those D words out of order, but basically that's the name of the book. Your Attention Please. The woman's name who wrote it was Allison something. It might be like Allison Davis. Best book I've ever seen, Deborah, in my entire life, in like only 150 pages of like, this is how you need to communicate with other busy people. And it's like the best thing I've ever read in my life. And so I would just say, to, from a leadership perspective, invest in communications, invest in teaching your team how to communicate, how you communicate with your customers, how your leaders communicate. And it's all aspects of it, including cross cultural
Yes.
communication, right? And also language that looks at unconscious bias, and, that disregards or takes no account for diversity, and
Right.
how we're making others feel. So yeah, I think you've hit on something really big there.
Well, and I think going full circle back to the beginning of our conversation, when we look at the trust aspect, when within a company, and too often, this is again my view, but hey, it's my view. You don't have to agree with it. um, when we look at diversity and inclusion and all that, it's not a check the box.
No.
It's a way to grow a business when you can open up, as you mentioned at one time earlier, and I've got it even on my webpage. The world is moving faster than it ever has before, and it will never move this slow again. And looking at that, when we bring in diversity, I don't care if it's from across the United States, from its age, from color of the skin, from other countries, from religion, from whatever. ask some freaking questions and then listen, because you'd be amazed at what people come up with when you tap into their subconscious mind and start getting some of these unique ideas that it's like, wow, never thought about that. Let's
Oh, yeah.
discuss that, you
Oh,
know?
and and also let's look at just some of the idiotic decisions that companies, make. And there was an entire, I won't go into it, but Spain just a few months ago with the stamps that they put out. If you guys haven't seen that story about Spain and their postage stamps that were supposed to celebrate diversity, and what they ended up doing instead, they pulled them back, but like when you look at the decisions that companies make, there were some recent brands, some pretty big, if not the biggest influencer on Instagram of all time, who put out a product line and took zero consideration, her branding people, on a name of the product. They ended up pausing the new product launch and having to rebrand the whole thing and go back out again. Besides for what that does to your own brand, the cost of doing that.
Oh
And
my
so I
gosh,
think,
yes.
it's just massive. So I think about just the importance, one, from just from a karma perspective, from an honoring of other human souls perspective, and honoring all people. And then also from a very business matter of fact place, we can't ignore that either, that you really have to look at this. And I think it all starts with communication. It all ends with communication. And so that, to me, all you can have the best intentions as a leader, but if you don't communicate those intentions, or how you communicate those intentions isn't received, then it doesn't matter what your intention was, right? You look
Right.
at some of the apologies that people have had to make over the last couple of years, and they say, well, I didn't mean to do it. But ultimately, communication is what's received by the other person. And
Absolutely.
so I think that's really something that needs to have really more urgency with leaders at all sizes of organizations. We have to make
Right.
that front and center, and a big part of the leadership discussion.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and you're right, there's been so many oops, in the last year or more, multiple years of, like you say, products going out there in ways that they didn't ask the right questions, they didn't ask the right
Mhm.
people. Good intentions, but didn't work, and, I
Yep.
look at how do who needs to be in the room when you're making those decisions, and not necessarily physically in the room, but how do you put a chair and go sit, even if it's mentally, go sit in that other chair and have a conversation with that person and saying, so what is it that you need from me? And look at from their perspective. What if I say this, how might you respond to it? And again, like you said earlier, leaders haven't been taught skills like that
They
could
have.
save them a lot of time and money and grief, if they would simply implement.
Yeah,
So,
and there's also, I think that there are organizational dynamics that have to be addressed as well, because a lot of organizations, a leader is afraid to go ask those
right,
questions because they feel like they'll lose control over their domain. And so there's all of these sort of control issues that go on inside of organizations. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack. It's why you're in business. It's why you're in business. It's why
right,
leadership is one of the fastest growing areas of company spending right now, because they
right,
realize, like you said, I can't even believe that some of these skills were ever referred to as soft skills.
right,
These are the power skills. I loved when you said that. And this is really what it's all about. But I also think we have to have some really, I personally, being the unapologetic individual that I am, believe that some of these conversations need to be, you know, very tangible. They have to look at the counterbalances that, like I said earlier, between yes, we need fulfillment. Yes, we need the right kind of leadership skills. Also, employees need to be held accountable for how they perform. We can't let go of performance expectations, because there is a reason that somebody, this isn't a vacation when you're at work. It should be
right.
enjoyable, but also there's a responsibility there from the employees. I think we have to have tougher. I think at the end of the day, Deborah, what really is going to have to happen for some of the final pendulum to swing or the dominoes to kind of fall in us is that we have to be willing to have, I think, tougher conversations, right? Like,
Right.
more honest conversations and really lay it out as adults. And I think that's where we're headed. That's my suspicion. I think that's where we're headed. I don't think organizations have a choice.
Not if they want to be sustainable for the long term. They don't have
Right.
a choice because, again, they're going to be losing more and more people if they don't do some things like that.
They're going to become irrelevant, frankly. You
Right.
look at these companies that are the retailers for a lot here in the United States. I know you have an international audience for the show. Here in the United States, we have some brands that have been around for almost 100 years, and this will be their last Christmas because the
Right. Yeah.
brands didn't make it because they weren't willing to have tough conversations.
Right.
So I think that's really, I mean, you're talking about the death of brands, not just, poor performance and employees leaving. You're talking about complete irrelevance, and not existing anymore.
But like you said, it's asking the questions that others are afraid to ask and
Yes.
opening up and saying the things that typically in the past, like you said, you didn't think you could say or would say because you'd look weak. And instead, it shows your strength and your vulnerability. And as you mentioned earlier, that's when the team buys in and you go from being a group of very intelligent people that together they're level, and it's been proven their level of intelligence actually goes down. Individually, they
Mhm.
have great intelligence, but as a group, they come together and they
Yep.
start to lessen their intelligence because they're not working as a team. They're a group, all looking at their individual egos and how they can protect their silos, in some way, shape, or form. I am so thankful for you being here, and I appreciate the conversation. As always, stimulating conversation, great conversation to have. Um, who would be the right person to get a hold of you or Bold House, and how could they get a hold of you if they chose to?
Well, thank you for this conversation. First and foremost, Deborah, I think these are the conversations that we need to be having to really move the needle on what's going on from small companies to major corporations, and how we do it. And I think it happens through table talk like this.
Yes.
Um, the best way to get a hold of me, you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Angelique Rewers on LinkedIn. As of last year, I was only one of two people on the planet with my name. So it's pretty easy to find me. The other great way to connect with us is at boldhaus.com. You can see that spelling under there, BOLDHAUS.com. You can schedule a call with our team. We also have some really cool resources there. For those of you who are in that consulting space or that expert space, there's a really great free proposal template on there that's awesome, fully editable, and some great articles and videos and conversations like this. And Deborah, we can't wait to share this conversation with our community, because again, I feel like no matter what level role you're in, you really have an invitation today to lead, the opportunity to lead, and you need to start thinking like a leader and behaving like a leader before you're maybe in that
Why
title
don't we?
of
Okay,
leader.
let's take. We're going to take just a moment, and then go back and start up
Sure.
with that sentence if you can,
Yeah.
or
Sure.
however you choose to phrase it.
Yeah.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
So just to take these lessons that Deborah is sharing here, and these lessons from conversation, and remember, no matter what role you're in, doesn't matter what that title is, it's really an invitation and an opportunity to think like and behave like a leader from any place that you are today. It's really what the world needs. So make sure you're staying here for these shows and getting all of this great information. And Deborah, thanks again for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure and my honor, and I will say from my own perspective, as a client of Angelique's as well, that she is one of the best of the best in guiding her clients and keeping them accountable for doing what's necessary in order to get the clients that you're really looking to tap into, so you can help change the world as well. Angelique, thank you so much for sharing your
Thank
brilliance
you.
and for being so open and in answering the questions and with experiences and stories that help us all learn. So this has been Leaders on the Edge. Be sure to look at the show notes. We'll have all of Angelique's links on that out there where you can connect with her easily. Thank you for listening, and be sure to like, share, and come back and listen more to Leaders on the Edge. Never let them see you sweat.